When a family goes through something really tough, like a divorce or a loss, what does justice actually look like? Is it just a matter of who gets what, or is there something more to it? Well, today we're going to look at an ancient blueprint that gives a pretty surprising answer.
So, we're going to dive into a specific passage from the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 233 to 242. And look, this isn't just some dry, dusty legal text. These 10 verses are actually a deeply humane framework, and they're designed to protect the most vulnerable people when life gets turned upside down.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the legal foundations. Then we'll look at the specific protections for family members. But then, and this is the cool part, we're going to find this surprising spiritual anchor right in the middle of everything. After that, we'll see how compassion itself becomes law. And finally, we'll uncover the real purpose behind all this divine wisdom.
All right, let's jump right in. The first thing you've got to get is that these verses aren't just a random list of rules. No, they form a whole system, a blueprint. And it's all built on this delicate balance of rights and responsibilities, designed to create stability right when life feels the most chaotic.
So, right away, the framework gets straight to the point. It lays out these core protections for the people who are most affected when a family breaks apart. And the very first thing it does, it establishes that the child's well-being comes first. Always.
So the verse kicks off with something super fundamental to a child's early life, nursing. But as you'll see, the verse uses this specific act to establish a much, much bigger principle for protecting the child.
So what you're seeing here is basically the foundation of the best interest of the child principle in Islamic law. It sets out clear roles. The mother has the right to nurture, the father has the duty to provide financially, and this is so important, it builds this firewall, making it forbidden for either parent to use their child as a weapon against the other. The whole thing is guided by this standard of fairness. Nobody should be burdened with more than they can handle.
Next up, the Quran turns to the situation of a widow. This verse specifies a waiting period, called the iddah, that she observes before she can get remarried. And this period, it's pretty unique.
So this waiting period, the iddah, it's doing two things at once. First, it's a period of respect. It gives her time to grieve, to recover emotionally. But on a practical level, it also makes sure there's no confusion about a potential pregnancy. And, critically, it explicitly guarantees her freedom to rebuild her life and get married again once that time is up.
Okay, so before we go any further, there's a key concept we need to get our heads around. It's called muda. Now, this is not the dowry. It's something completely separate. It's a mandatory gift, a consolation gift, that the husband gives his divorced wife. Think of it as a tangible act of compassion to help her get back on her feet.
And this is where things get really interesting, because the Quran shows us how it balances strict legal rules with a higher sense of morality. This next verse lays out a very specific situation about the dowry. What happens if there's a divorce before the marriage is consummated, but after the dowry has already been agreed upon? This slide, it lays it all out perfectly. You see, the law sets a clear, non-negotiable minimum. The husband has to pay half of the dowry. That's the floor. But right after stating the law, it points to a higher path. It says that true righteousness is about going beyond that minimum. Either the man pays the full amount, or the woman forgoes her right to the half. It establishes a legal floor, but it's always pushing you to aim higher for that moral ceiling.
Okay, so we're deep in the weeds of legal stuff, right? Dowries, waiting periods, and then, boom, the text just completely shifts gears. The topic changes from law to worship, just like that.
And you have to ask, right? Why? Why stick a command about prayer smack dab in the middle of a legal discussion? What's the connection here?
And the verse is pretty direct. It's a powerful call to keep up with your prayers, to be diligent, especially with that middle prayer, and to really be present when you stand before God. But where it's placed, that's the genius of it. It's totally deliberate, and it's incredibly profound.
So what's the message here? It's crystal clear. The stress of fighting over legal rights, the emotional chaos of a divorce, none of that stuff should be allowed to cut you off from your spiritual anchor. The Quran is arguing that you can't have real justice on earth if you lose your connection to the divine.
So you can really see how these two parts work together. On one side, you've got the legal rights. They're there to manage the external conflicts, to give society a structure. On the other side, you've got spiritual balance. That's for managing your own internal turmoil, for keeping you centered as an individual. And the text is basically saying you need both for true justice to work.
All right, so after reminding everyone to stay grounded spiritually, the Quran circles right back to the legal stuff. But now, we're supposed to see these rules through this new, more mindful lens.
And that brings us right back to muta, that provision for divorced women. But pay close attention to the words it uses here. It's described as a duty, even a debt, that falls on people who are righteous, people who are mindful of God.
So when you pull back and look at these verses together, you see the blueprint for a powerful social safety net. An earlier verse already gave a widow a year of support. Now this one expands that idea, making a provision for all divorced women a legal right. This isn't just a nice suggestion, a bit of charity. No, it's framed as an obligation. The whole point is to give her a kind of starting capital so she can stand on her own 2 feet and rebuild her life with dignity.
Okay, so we've gone through 10 verses of detailed law, ethical advice, spiritual reminders, and now the passage wraps up by telling us why. Why is all of this laid out with such incredible detail?
And this last verse, this is the key to the whole thing. The guidance is made clear, it says, not just for you to obey, but so that you might use your reason, your intellect.
And that's the big takeaway here. The entire system, from child support to prayer to these consolation gifts, it's not presented for blind obedience. It's presented as a logical, coherent system. It's basically saying, don't just follow the rules blindly, understand the why behind them. The goal is to build a just society, to protect the vulnerable, and to create harmony. It's a call to engage our minds, not just to follow orders.
And what's just wild is that all of this whole system, is laid out in just 10 verses. 10 verses that give us a complete blueprint, one that's comprehensive, deeply compassionate, and totally focused on a vision of justice for the entire family.
So, that leaves us with a pretty big question to chew on. We live in a world that often tries to separate law from morality and our public lives from our private spirituality. So what can we learn from a system that says, no way, they're all connected? How does a framework that makes compassion a legal requirement and anchors everything in spiritual mindfulness, how does that challenge our own ideas about what it really takes to build a truly just society?